Hello and welcome retailers and manufacturers to day 5 of TPE Ignite's online educational series. This, unfortunately, will be our last session of the week. My name is Ben Stimson, Managing Director for TMG Media. And today's session is called The Alternative Take, CBD, Cannabis, and the Road Ahead. Presenting today's session is Bethany Gomez. Bethany is a founding member of the Brightfield Group and started her journey back in 2015 with the company. She has extensive background in quantitative research, global policy, and strategic planning with a focus on emerging markets. Bethany's core responsibilities is to manage the growing Brightfield team and drive new product development. She is the key drive of business development, managing some of Brightfield's top clients, ensuring long-term success. Her passion for CBD and cannabis helps drive the Brightfield team forward and deliver comprehensive and data-driven results for all of their members and their customers. We're going to go live with Bethany and introduce her. Bethany, welcome again to TPE Ignite, our online series for 2022. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Ben.
Thanks for joining us again. I know that you were with us last year, and last year you have a great presentation, and so much has changed in the industry. It seems daily, but in the last 12 months, it's crazy, right?
It's absolutely crazy. As with many emerging markets, they seem to move at the speed of light. We always say in cannabis industry operates in dog years. So there's been so much that has happened over the last year here. And what I'll really be focusing on today is walking through where the industry is and how companies that are looking at working with the category can really stay ahead of the curve and be able to benefit.
Great. I know that as we said, we're looking forward to your presentation. The industry changes. You know, we've heard a lot about products such as Delta 8, Delta 10. I think THCO, and there's so many more cannabinoids coming out. HHC, I believe, is another one. Yep. Just a quick question before we get started. But why do you think there is such a fast-paced need for innovation in this category?
Yeah. So what's really driving the growth in, Delta 8, Delta 10, THCO, a lot of these cannabinoids are psychoactive in nature. But derived from the hemp plant. So there's currently this legal gray area right now, or legal loophole, I should say, that's really allowing for consumers to be able to, around the country, to be able to access psychoactive products that are similar in nature to the cannabis products that have been so popular for decades, but be able to not be subjected to the same level of regulations and restrictions as that legal cannabis industry. Now, regulations also are driving a lot of that innovation because as Delta 8 gets shut down, then folks start to switch to Delta 10, which is pretty similar in nature, or to THCO or to HHC, which aren't necessarily subject to the same level of regulation. So there's a bit of a creative whack-a-mole going on there, as companies, consumers are constantly looking for that same need to be filled, while companies need to be able to continue to stay ahead of the curve, to be able to navigate, where the market is going, to be able to thrive from their business.
It's exciting.
It is. It's exciting. Never a dull moment. That's for sure.
That's good. Well, look, without further ado, I'm so excited to have you again be a part of this session this year. I'm going to turn it over to you, and we'll have a Q&A after once you've finished your session.
Perfect. Thanks, Ben. All right. Okay. So we're going to take a look, as we mentioned, we'll take a look today at, CBD cannabis and what's next. What is that next wave of innovation? And how can you, as companies that are watching the space, either from a retail or from a manufacturing lens, what do you need to know, and how can you stay ahead of that curve there? CBD and cannabis have certainly been some of the most dynamic and fascinating, products to shake up this industry in decades, and have created a really incredible opportunity for companies both on the retail and manufacturing side of the smoke and vape space in here. But there's also a lot of challenges, in this category as well. So we'll take a look and dig in. As we kick off here, we'll take a look at who is Brightfield for those of you who aren't familiar with us and what we do. What is the state of the CBD industry today? Where are things sitting? Where are they going, both in the immediate term as well as longer, as well as really focus in on these innovations that have changed the shape of the CBD industry, particularly as they relate to, the smoke and vape shop categories. Then, we'll dig into some of these different cannabinoids that Ben was mentioning there. Things like Delta 8, some of the minors, THCO and beyond. Also, really to look at one of the newest kids on the block in here as well, which is this explosion that we're just starting to see in functional mushrooms or adaptogen-based products. Those are definitely a category to watch, so we'll get into a bit of depth on that as well. But really, this is all happening in this larger context of cannabis legalization around the country as well. So this has a significant impact on all of the industries mentioned previously as consumers really use these products in the larger context of the cannabis industry. So you as companies, that are operating, either from a retailer manufacturing lens, should really have a strong grasp as to where that market is, where it's going, and how can you position your business to benefit from that rather than compete with it. So who is Brightfield, right? A little bit about us. So we are really the leading market research firm focused on the cannabis, CBD, and emerging product trends. So we do leverage a wide variety of different methodologies to look at a holistic 360-degree view of emerging products. Ben had mentioned my background is really in emerging market product research. And one thing I always find is that in emerging markets, there's never going to be one magical data source that's going to give you the answer to all of your questions. So at Brightfield, we leverage a multitude of different resources, including things like consumer surveys, digital menu audits, partnerships with retailers and brands, as well as social listening data and other tools to be able to pull all of our data together, triangulate, and see the market from a wide variety of angles. So this gives our clients the ability to see new trends before they crest, as well as be able to have a great deal of depth of data and insights on these new and emerging categories. So what is the state of the CBD industry today? CBD has been one of the most dynamic and crazy industries that we have seen in a very long time. The industry first got its boom when the Farm Bill passed at the end of 2018, and we saw massive growth in 2019, about 560% growth as CBD grew from about 700 or less than $600 million into about a $4 billion industry. Seemingly overnight. Now, there's a lot of challenges in the CBD industry. Once hemp was legalized, through the Farm Bill, it essentially took CBD and put it from the purview of the DEA into the purview of the FDA. Now, the FDA has really been kind of hanging out in this legal gray area for quite some time. They announced, CBD. They understand there's a lot of demand for CBD products. There's a lot of support for the mass commercialization of CBD products, but they need to get a workable regulatory structure in place before they will really officially permit these products to be scaled in mass. They made that announcement shortly after the Farm Bill passed at the end of 2018. Now we're in January 2022, and not much has changed, from the FDA level. So what this has led to from the market was initially we saw a very large growth trajectory as the supply of hemp increased and the amount of CBD products and the focus on those and consumer adoption of those CBD products really scaled up in 2019, while some players with larger risk tolerance levels were willing to start carrying these products or producing these products. The largest companies and chains have continued to limit and not yet enter, the CBD industry or be able to start carrying CBD products. So this has left us in a bit of a gray area that we're still in today. So what that means, so zoom forward to where we are in January 2022. Right now, what we see is CBD and the full array of CBD products, which come in tinctures and gummies and topicals and in capsules, are currently being sold through hundreds of thousands of independent retailers around the country, particularly many smoke and vape shops. Smoke and vape shops were really one of the first channels that really started carrying CBD products. There's also a great deal of CBD specialty retailers carrying products, but they really are sold through a wide variety of different retailers, everything from pet retailers to acupuncturists to natural food stores, grocery stores, a wide variety of different channels. Because the large chains of retailers, so Target or Kroger's or Albertsons aren't carrying a full array of products, and when I say that, that includes ingestible products like gummies or tinctures, capsules, other form factors that are very common, are not being carried through those large chained retailers at this juncture, and they will not be carried by most of those large chained retailers until there is movement from the FDA. So this has kind of led to a bit of a slowdown in growth from of the CBD industry, where it's really hit the level that it is today, where it has very strong penetration through independent retailers. It has very strong adoption amongst many consumers and we'll get a little bit more into the consumer lens of this, but it has the strong adoption rate, strong penetration, but that isn't, we're seeing a slowdown in growth right now, both limited by that, that lack of regulatory clarity from the FDA, as well as kind of that continuing, impacts of the pandemic impacting, brick and mortar growth, as well as, to mention, what we'll hit on later, increased competition from the cannabis space and from the Delta 8 space. So we can see in the chart here, the growth rate was relatively flat. In 2020, it was relatively flat going into 2021. Now, as the pandemic, hopefully as we get past Omicron here in the early months, we do expect some additional growth in 2022. And assuming that the FDA does provide some additional regulatory clarity, there is a very large upside for the cannabis industry overall once, to be pumped through these additional chained retailers and for more investment from outside companies once that regulatory clarity comes. However, it does, the FDA has been quite busy and with the pandemic, and they are not, there is not a large sign that they're moving anytime in the immediate term in here as well. So really that strong upside for the CBD industry is pushed farther out. What that means in the immediate term is that we have a great deal of opportunity with these independent retailers who don't, who can carry this this larger array of CBD products and don't have to compete with larger players like Targets or Amazon or those types of chains as well. The other thing I'll mention about the the industry overall and kind of the growth and adjustments that we're seeing is that there is some level of price compression that continues in the market today. Now, initially, in 2019, the prices were very, very high, for products around the country. At the beginning of the year, by the end of 2019, once that bumper crop of hemp was cultivated or was, brought to market, supply prices dropped, and we were able to see a lot of cost savings, just slicing of prices. A lot of that cost savings being able to be passed down to consumers. But the downward pressure of pricing in the industry really continues and persists right now. And while initially that price, downward pressure was coming from companies really slashing the prices of their whole portfolio of products. Really, what we saw a lot of in 2021, and we expect to continue through 2022, is consumers switching from some of the higher price point products, like tinctures or topicals, into lower price point products that allow them to, like capsules or gummies, that allow them to continue using CBD on a daily basis, on a continuous basis in there, but not paying those very high price tags. It was very commonplace to see a $90, $80 bottle of tinctures previously, and that's not really the average consumer purchase any longer. So taking a look here at the evolution of the CBD consumer, really what we're seeing here, and apologize, I think there's some formatting challenges on the slides, in here. But initially what we're seeing is a strong growth in consumers that are in penetration of CBD amongst Americans. So even though the market is kind of stagnant, we're actually continuing to see the percentage of Americans who are using CBD or have reported purchasing CBD in the past 3 months go up. So this has continued to increase. By 2023. This was as high as 13% purchasing CBD in the last 3 months. Now, what we also have seen is that throughout 2020 and into 2021, we've seen consumers shift from buying something every once in a while, using a gummy or tinctures, using their products every once in a while, to being daily consistent consumers. As we can see from the data here, about 56% of consumers are using at least 5 days per week. So this is really kind of becoming part of people's daily routine. And that increased frequency of consumption and that ritual really signifies a strong foundation, for the market. However, the proportion of consumer spending, consumers are spending less per product, than they did, in previous years. So they're spending less per product. They're spending less per month. And even those heavy, daily users are spending less than they did, a year ago. Again, this makes sense both with, price cuts, but also, in this culture of discounting that's emerged, in the category, but really a lot of this shift towards, lower price point, offerings and things that have, for those occasional consumption, having things like CBD drinks or, other or small pack gummies, or other more kind of treat products that have a lower price point, for more individual packs, are really strong and prevalent. We also are seeing CBD penetrating more diverse age range. So this, at the onset, this was very millennial dominated, especially when the pandemic first hit. The millennials were really the consumer group that were holding on tight to, their CBD products. They were not kind of deviating from that, whereas, there was some dips in purchasing from other channels as consumers were evaluating their overall purchasing habits with the uncertainty ahead. In 2021, what we really saw was a more diverse age range, with this really kind of bifurcating, the growth bifurcating. So a lot of growth in baby boomers as consumers. This had really dropped off in 2020 when the pandemic first hit. Saw a lot of growth in penetration, again. So there is a more opportunity kind of growing from that lens, but really this Gen Z consumer segment that is really growing up and coming into adulthood in a time of legal cannabis or of easily legal cannabinoids, and being able to really easily access these products is really driving a lot of growth and an area that is a strong potential audience or potential market moving forward. So death to the tincture, depending on what your experience level is in the industry. Tinctures are kind of a bottle with like an eyedropper of oil or, a fairly viscous type of liquid that you can take sublingually. It's kind of a weird product. It definitely was the stalwart of the CBD industry, and really dominated in those early years, largely due to its ease of manufacturing. But you don't really see tinctures in other aspects of daily life. So it's kind of a strange product. And a lot of consumers are shifting away to much more familiar form factors. So we see, in terms of kind of growth trajectory here, drinks really dominating, gummies really dominating, capsules getting strong uptake here moving forward. Both products that are less expensive, for consumers, but also can fit more closely into their daily routines there. From a changing face of retail, in here, I hit on this a bit previously, but the major chains of retailers have yet to really start selling a significant share, of CBD, and independent retailers and grocers are really what continues to kind of dominate this market. The non-chain stores, which include smoke and vape shops, as well as the CBD specialty retailers and other independent stores, remain a really powerful channel for CBD sales right now, especially because they give the ability for consumers to talk to a human about what the products are that they're buying, and can expect some level of knowledge about the products, from a store clerk or someone that has more of kind of the time and space to be able to have a conversation with them and answer their questions. CBD is definitely still a category that there are a lot of questions and a lot of lack of understanding about, especially differentiating between the thousands of brands that are out there in different form factors, and understanding how this relates to cannabis and now Delta 8 and THCO and all of these other products that are out there. That level of clarity is really helpful for consumers and continues to provide a strong differentiator in the market. E-commerce, really since the pandemic hit, e-com shot up in terms of percentage of the market, and it's really held there. A large percentage of consumers report, purchasing, and the amount of consumers purchasing online, their CBD online, doubled from Q4 2019 when the pandemic hit at the end of Q1, and now early Q2 had shot up from about 24% to about 50% of consumers purchasing their products online. And that's really holding strong in here. Consumers continue to purchase online. They like the convenience. They like the ability to continue to shop in that way. So just something to keep in mind that remains a competitor, that remains competitive in the market, and is something that we want to. It's a continued prominent channel, although there aren't a lot of strong marketplaces. Today there are a handful. Many consumers are still buying from this mass, owned store sites from a retail lens. So what's happening from an innovation standpoint here? We can take a look at Delta 8 is something that really kind of took off towards the end of 2020, early 2021, has really been all over in 2021, really exploded onto the scene in terms of popularity. So about 5.4% of Americans reported purchasing Delta 8 products in 2021. So that's huge. That's more than echinacea, for example. So this is a really strong prevalence prevalence rate, compared to is about half the rate of CBD, if that gives you some context in here. The Delta 8, if you're not familiar with Delta 8, this is kind of a loophole on the legal cannabis industry. It's a minor cannabinoid extracted from the hemp product or the hemp plant. It is psychoactive in nature, but more mild, said to produce a more mild high with lower level of psychoactive components than Delta 9 THC, which is the psychoactive component that you find in traditional cannabis marijuana products, that we're all accustomed to. So this loophole really kind of exploded onto the scene, and it has been very widely marketed or very widely promoted through smoke and vape shops. Certainly, I'm sure I don't need to tell a lot of the folks on this call that, but has really exploded through smoke and vape shops, and has really manufactured into a wide array of different products. It's not just flower. It's not just, not just vape products in here. This includes everything from gummies to tinctures to pre-rolls, really all of the same form factors that you find in, or many of the same form factors that you find in either the cannabis or the CBD industry. We're really just swapping compounds, in here. These are particularly popular in states that don't have access to legal cannabis, in the dispensary market there. But even in states with legal cannabis, many consumers are continuing to purchase Delta 8 or prefer Delta 8, products because of their ease of being able to order online, or a wide variety of other, reasons. It's just easier. They don't have to actually go into a dispensary. And in many cases, and particularly in many states that have very high tax rates, it is cheaper. So it can be a nice kind of cheap, approachable component. Now, most of the companies operating in this Delta 8 space are pretty small, and nobody's putting like a huge amount of money into, innovation and R&D here, which is something that everyone should really be cautious about. This is completely unregulated. So that means that they're, and CBD is certainly unregulated as well, but generally doesn't cause psychoactive results. There is a lot of concern about, bad actors or fly-by-night companies creating products that are not tested and could create a lot of, produce a lot of harm in the consumer. So just something to keep in mind. That's definitely a liability. Certainly encourage you to, if you're looking at carrying these products, make sure to get those that have been tested, and those that are not likely to cause harm to your, those consuming it. Delta 8 now has, because it's in this legal loophole, it also is starting to get banned in many areas. So, many states have already banned, Delta 8 in there, which is kind of giving, both creating the components that many companies aren't really investing a lot in their product lines in here because they're trying to make a quick buck before the opportunity goes away. But also it's kind of giving way to what we see in the next slide here, which is the next chapter of minor cannabinoids, right? So what's next? If Delta 8 gets shut down, then we see things like Delta 10 pop up. Delta 10 is really very similar in nature to Delta 8, psychoactive, but less potent than, Delta 9, and, really just seen as kind of another, this kind of whack-a-mole component, right? If Delta 8's banned, then we'll switch to Delta 10. If Delta 10 gets banned, well, then what's next, beyond that? HHC is another one that is, Ben had mentioned as, really one of the brand new kids on the block, in here. This is a semi-synthetic cannabinoid. It is, like the deltas in here, it does also create psychoactive effects. These are believed to be more potent, than the Delta 8 or Delta 10 in here. So certainly something to keep in mind. Also, again, they're not really being manufactured by large companies in here, are getting a lot of investment. So would certainly encourage a word of caution. There's not a lot of data or research on any of them. So the potential for harm is much, higher on those products. THCO is another psychoactive product that I would kind of refer to in the same vein, the same breath as these other cannabinoids here. It's a more potent form of THC synthesized in a lab rather than, being naturally found in cannabis plants. And it does have a longer onset period and is more psychoactive. So, again, this is apologies. This is a somewhat concerning for the rise of these kind of more psychoactive ingredients is definitely concerning for a lot of regulators. More and more states are kind of becoming more reactive to starting to ban some of these substances. So just keep in mind, just say we're not building 5-year forecasts on many of these products, in here. So keep in mind these may be more short-lived opportunities, and would certainly encourage a healthy amount of caution, before jumping on this bandwagon, and ensuring you understand, who you're working with, and the quality of the products in here. We also see a large growth in minor cannabinoids that are not psychoactive in nature, but have different, more medicinal effects. And these have really been discussed in kind of that hemp and CBD space for a long time, and have more testing associated with them, and are being rolled out on by more companies that are more of the top players in the CBD market, and more kind of adjacent to the positioning in CBD. Two of the top ones in there that are really starting to get some legs. CBN is one of these. This is really considered like the sleep cannabinoid in there. This is something that is oftentimes combined with melatonin to be able to piggyback on those claims, and be able to, create products with CBN and melatonin, maybe CBD in there too, and really cleanly position those as sleep products, which are increasingly popular during especially since the pandemic hit. And, there's a lot keeping folks up at night. Let's just put it that way. CBG is also a growing cannabinoid. This has a number of different applications in here. It's kind of viewed for its anti-inflammatory, antibacterial benefits. It's very frequently used in topicals, and it's kind of like the skin cannabinoid. So it's very frequently used there. But we do also find it in a wide variety of products being actively marketed through the smoke and vape shop channel, like flower, or pre-rolls, or hemp sticks, things like that as well. The shroom boom, you may be just starting to hear about this, or maybe it's already been on your radar. Certainly in the, press and the investment community, there's a lot of excitement about psilocybin, and, psilocybin, which is essentially magic mushrooms, definitely psychoactive mushrooms that are, looked at for more medicinal purposes to help with PTSD, anxiety, depression, things like that. They're less psychoactive and more wellness focused cousin in here is the group of adaptogens, or functional mushrooms. So functional mushrooms are different, and completely different use case. They are absolutely not psychoactive in nature, and are really more in kind of the supplements-esque positioning, have a much closer positioning to CBD. A lot of the growth that we're seeing in this category is somewhat reminiscent of the early days in CBD, and a lot of companies that are a lot of CBD companies, or companies that have been prevalent in the CBD space, are looking at expansion outside of CBD into some of these adaptogen-based products. So some of the top ones in here include reishi mushrooms, which are thought to help support the immune systems, in times of stress, possessing antioxidant properties. Lion's mane, also another source of antioxidants. and also look to help with anxiety, depression, etc. But we can see based off of the data shown above in here, which shows the percentage of consumers that have purchased each of these different adaptogen products over the past 3 months. In here, the rates are really quite high. So your reishi mushroom, 2.4% of American consumers had purchased reishi mushrooms in the past 3 months, which is huge, right? It's a small but growing category, and this is up significantly versus 6 months ago. Lion's mane also, really starting to gain some traction. Cordyceps, another one that is really starting to gain some traction in here as well. So a lot of these functional mushrooms to keep an eye on. This is exploding through the functional food and bev space right now. If you look at a lot of the top, products that are working their way through the or kind of exploding onto the scenes of the functional bev space, just about all of them have adaptogens included in there. So as consumers are really looking for ways to improve their and control their anxiety, their depression, improve their immunity, things like that. And while those are traditionally thought of as being more for the, the more of health and wellness markets or kind of the natural products consumers, as certainly all of you saw from the CBD boom, that can absolutely be marketed towards your consumers as well, or consumers purchasing through smoke and vape shop channels. It's not, these are not positionings or need states that are really exclusive for, exclusive for kind of these, trendy enthusiasts or like the first movers in the, health and wellness space. They are gaining a lot of popularity amongst more kind of low middle income consumers, that also use tobacco products and are looking at this more as a way to be able to kind of control their anxiety, their depression, help with their sleep, things like that, for really a lot of the same use cases and purposes that people are coming to CBD for, or we're coming to CBD or Delta 8 for as well. So something to keep in mind, many CBD companies starting to market these types of products as well. All right, next slide in here. So that's kind of from an innovation in these in-between zones. I did also really want to kind of provide a bit of a landscape of what's happening in this larger backdrop of the cannabis space. We oftentimes ignore that, CBD and, Delta 8, many of these products are, coming from the hemp plant, but the hemp plant is really the same genus, the same plant as the cannabis plant, as the marijuana plant, just with slightly different formulations in here. So you really shouldn't be looking at one without the context of the other, while also, looking at there's a gradual but very significant transition happening in the U.S. space as cannabis continues to be legalized, piece by piece by piece, state by state, liberalized, legalized in each area, and that wave just continues to grow. So, with that being said, it's really important for, in the inhalable space, as the consumers that are companies that are watching the inhalable space, to really have an understanding of this market, what's happening, and what where the opportunities are over the longer term. So taking a look at kind of the overall state of the industry, we are by the end of 2021, the U.S. cannabis space hit about $26 billion in sales. Yes, that's billion with a B. And that's really only with a small percentage of states having fully scaled legal U.S. cannabis markets, or scaled adult use markets, I should say. By 2026, even without federal legalization, by 2026, just with this continued growth of more states themselves opening up legal cannabis, we expect this to be a $50 $50 billion industry. So, the market continues to experience about a CAGR of about 11% growth per year. So again, it's steady, it's consistent. New markets open. It takes a little while for them to ramp up, and then you start to see that that revenue coming in. The sales that we saw in 2021 were really, and a lot of the growth that we saw in 2021 were really, many of which were derived from markets that were not online, 2 years ago, right? That were just starting to open up and really hit their stride. Many of the states that are opening up now will continue to grow, to drive that growth 2023, 2024, and beyond. In 2021, adult use sales constituted about 60% of the total retail cannabis sales. So about a 60-40 with medical, but that's expected to grow to about 71% by 2026 as there's more states legalizing adult use on an ongoing basis. With about a third of those adult use sales in 2026 coming from markets that haven't opened yet, right? So many of these large populous states, some of the most populous states of the country, are legalizing cannabis, but it'll take a while for those states to be able to realize those sales. It takes a while once a state says, okay, great, we're going to legalize recreational cannabis. It will take, typically it takes anywhere from 12 to 18 months, although those timeframes are getting shortened, to really kind of get the regulations in place and be able to start even handing out licenses. And it usually takes another 12 to 18 months thereafter for sales to really ramp up as they work through supply chain shortages or other store openings, things like that as well. So long trajectory of growth with additional states opening up in those more populous east of the Mississippi markets. And really, this continued legalization is in no small part right now being driven by the need to balance budgets. Coming out of the pandemic, this is a very many states are looking at very significant shortfalls in revenue and, are really looking to be able to fill those coffers with New York, New Mexico, Virginia really being, highlighted as from that example. Looking ahead, there's a lot on this slide, in here, but looking ahead, we can take a look at who some of those different markets are that have existing markets that are kind of more mature, are more developing, new ones that are maybe not yet, haven't yet come online, with also many other ones that are really looking to grow and open up in the market here moving forward. So this kind of maps where everything is, really at a federal level with each of those, or at a state-by-state level with each of these different states. There's 2022 is definitely an election year as well. So we expect another wave of states to be legalizing right now, as well as after the elections happen and new governments come into place in a number of these different states. That's also a very strong time for legislation to be passed to open up adult use markets or medical markets. It's now becoming very commonplace, whereas previously it was only cannabis was only legalized via legislature or via ballot or amendments on the ballots. Now it is really very commonplace for it to be legalized via legislature. So Congress pushing things through. So essentially, long story short, expect a lot more growth and a lot more states to come online here. So what does that mean? It means that stigmas are dropping on cannabis, and cannabis use, is really growing amongst a wide variety of consumers. There were many consumers that were already using cannabis through the legacy market, and continue to use, really just transition, into the legal market when available, and that really drives a lot of the early sales in here. But we're also seeing kind of that average face of the cannabis consumer shift significantly. So it was very interesting to our team, certainly, that in 2021, the face of the cannabis consumer, the average cannabis consumer, actually shifted female for the first time ever. Women are using cannabis more and more regularly, and the common perception is, oh, they're just using gummies or chocolates or things like that, which again is a popular form factor, but they are flower users, they are vape users, they are using cannabis consistently, and really at all age levels, but specifically Gen Z consumers. So just it's something to keep in mind, that old the mentality of a very kind of male dominated cannabis space, or a male dominated cannabis consumer, is really shifting, and these consumers are purchasing a lot of products like flower and vapes that will require a lot of that make them good target markets for things like accessories, right? So it's something to keep in mind, from that lens as well. So how is cannabis stealing share from adjacent categories in here? This is, as this explosion of cannabis usage comes up, we find that it doesn't really happen in a vacuum. It has to come from somewhere, right? So we see cannabis really eating away at a lot of different, other markets. Some of cannabis consumers have been using consistently and, really kind of throughout their lives. So this isn't a big shift for them, but we are seeing a lot of shift away from, consumers downgrading their use of alcohol and using cannabis more significantly. We also are, seeing kind of the growth and penetration of this segment and going mainstream of this segment that doesn't drink alcohol at all anymore, and is really turning towards more of kind of a sober lifestyle, or turning to cannabis instead of alcohol, which is increasingly prominent amongst those Gen Z consumers. Or consumers who are looking to reduce the amount of their alcohol and not, use, alcohol on every occasion that they would have previously, but substituting a lot of those occasions for cannabis. We see the same thing to a lesser extent, but we do see some level of substitution for tobacco as well. In a recent study, we found that 17% stated their cannabis consumption led to less tobacco consumption usage entirely, or less tobacco consumption, apologies, while 14% replaced their tobacco consumption entirely. So they also over-index with a wide variety of other substances here, including, CBD, Delta-8, THCO, HHC, etc. So a lot of these, consumers are not only purchasing cannabis, they're purchasing a lot of these other products. But if your state doesn't currently have legal cannabis and you're making a killing off of Delta-8, Delta-10, THCO, products, and then, you see that your state's about to legalize cannabis, you may want to rethink your strategies in there, and really just expect some level of cannibalization over about a 2 to 3 year period once that market ramps up. But the opportunities then for you, really shift as well. And, the things that I'd like to highlight about that shift in opportunities, as there's more consumers that are purchasing products, more consumers using flower, more consumers using vaporizers, there are a lot of adjacent categories that do create, opportunities. So there's a lot of companies looking at the accessories market right now. This is a way that you can potentially take a look at, opportunities to be able to really grow, your company, or be able to kind of take advantage of that boom without necessarily touching the plant yourself. That makes sense. So overall, I know we're coming up on time here. When I hit on the key takeaways here. So when it comes to CBD, really expect for the immediate term for 2022, in particular, about a steady state here. The market's really stabilizing. Overall, we're not seeing massive growth in here. A lot of the shifts include consumers focusing more on ingestible products, particularly those gummies and capsules, not as much the kind of, drinks drinks also, but not as much kind of the weird novelty products that, were exciting a few years ago. Not as much, some of the, tincture form factors in there. There's some, definitely still usage of, pre-rolls, hemp sticks, vapes in there, but we don't see that penetration growing a lot. And that's being heavily competed with by Delta 8. A lot of those inhalable consumers are shifting to Delta 8, shifting to, THCO, more of the psychoactive products that more mimic, the cannabis experience. So keeping it fresh for consumers, is going to be important. There's a lot of innovations. Everybody's really curious on things, making sure your staff, whatever you feel good about, whatever products you're stocking, and make sure that, you feel good about how consumers are going to be using, and, that there's no liabilities included, everything's tested, et cetera. But really having that healthy mix of products can help from an innovation lens, while also really making sure that your staff can answer questions on the products, because there will be questions. Whenever anything changes this quickly, people don't know what these products are or what they do. So at least making sure that your staff has a significant level of kind of training on them, or education on what they are and what they can expect, can make sure, that both everybody stays safe, but also, that your customers come back happy. Consider some other products, that help to achieve similar need states. Again, there's the adaptogen trend is really kind of kicking off and raging. So there's a lot of opportunity there, from that lens as well as really kind of thinking how to position yourself to benefit and not compete with that growing legal cannabis space. Again, once a state, a new state comes online, you have a window of time before, the dispensary scene really kind of gets up to full speed or full blast in there. Again, it takes years. Cannabis does not move quickly, but when it comes, it stays. So, the opportunities need to be more symbiotic there, and being able to, help being able to benefit from, from the increased usage or accessory usage or things like that. So just changes the, the mix a little bit to some extent. And with that being said, I am going to cut it off here and turn it over to questions. Oh, I think you're on mute, Ben.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I love this session every year. It's informative. We get so much energy from it. The market, the adaptogens, the psilocybin, the mushrooms, all of these new emerging markets are great for us to learn and understand. And looking back, we've come so far from 2019. I remember the early days when we had stores who were selling products that were pretty much just pure MCT oil with no CBD in them, right? And nobody knew what it was. It got a bad rap. So many years later now, and we've probably seen some consolidation. A lot of those cowboy companies who were out there selling products that had no cannabinoids in them whatsoever.
Absolutely.
But in those 3 years, we've come so far. One of the questions I did have for you, and we have had some questions, we've got more coming through now. 2019, we saw a huge influx of farmers growing tons and tons, millions of tons of hemp, to the point where some of that was good quality, some of it was not so much because they didn't have the guidance on how to really grow this. And if you think about a farmer who's growing peanuts or whatever it may be, and they can get $25 a pound for their hemp now, have you seen that the amount of product that's available now from the farmers growing is less and less this year than it was 2 or 3 years ago?
Yeah, exactly. So, a couple of things that the cultivation space, just as the branded product space has grown up a little bit, the cultivation space has grown up a little bit as well. In 2019, when everybody started to put plants in the ground, commodity prices were very high, which got people very excited. And then everybody put plants in the ground and the commodity price plummeted, right? And what this led to is, a lot of farmers, again, put plants in the ground. It was their first time doing it. They were getting their kinks worked out. There was a lot of challenges with that harvest, both with farmers being able to get paid, being able to sell their products, the pricing that they thought they were going to get was wildly different. A lot of them, to your point, didn't have a lot of experience with it. So the first time you do something, it's not always going to be the highest quality results in there. So, the incentives for people to continue to put plants in the ground, had kind of diminished with kind of that market shakeup. So we're seeing things more right size, and that's really Econ 101, right? Yeah. That's how the economy works. So we're seeing that start to balance out, but also those players to be get better at what they're doing, right? Which really improves the level of quality involved.
That's good. And that's the end result, is the quality. If the quality is consistent and keeps growing, then the products, they work clearly, and people, from your presentation, oh my goodness, how many people are using it on a daily basis? That's huge.
Absolutely.
So I'm gonna bring Antoine in real quick. We've had some questions come through. He's going to field those real quick.
Yes, one of the questions from the audience was, which states are taking the most action in regards to regulation for Delta 8?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't have the list in front of me right now, but if you reach out after this call, we can send you the list of states that have banned. It changes on a very frequent basis in here, so I don't want to misspeak in here, but it is a growing list. And there are some states that have also kind of stayed ahead of the curve to ban Delta 10 in here as well. I believe there's about 11 of them right now. So it is a growing number, that continue to ban the substance there.
Just speaking of Delta 8 real quick, so just while we're on that subject, Las Vegas recently legalized marijuana, where we have our annual trade show, Tobacco Plus Expo, every year. This last year was a big change for us because Nevada made Delta 8 illegal. So for those companies coming in to showcase their products, now unfortunately not able to do that this year. However, on the Delta 8 side, that is, why is it that some states like New York, like Nevada, can legalize marijuana, yet Delta 8 is illegal? Is it a tax thing, or what is the reason?
Well, because in the legal cannabis space, there is a whole set of regulations in place that are very, very strict in nature to really monitor the quality of the cannabis plant, who is growing it, the testing of the products, how they're manufactured, what all is included, what other substances are included in those. No product can be sold in a legal cannabis market without having gone through a third-party independent testing. It has seed to sale tracking involved from a plant, the time a seed gets put in the ground till the time a consumer, purchase it, to make sure there's no diversion into the black market. There is also, in every business along the way, has to be licensed by the state, regulated, and and monitored by the state to ensure compliance with state law, and also pay taxes at the state level. And those taxation rates really vary based on the state, but it's taxed at a state level, oftentimes taxed again at a local level. So there's a lot of regulation on the cannabis space to really make sure that those products coming into the hands of consumers are safe, and that the state is benefiting from making sure that they're safe, right? And the jobs created. Delta 8, no one knows what's in it. No one knows whether it's, none of these businesses are regulated. None of these, there's no regulations on the product coming out. And what we've seen from the FDA is it's very, very slow and difficult for them to be able to put out a regulatory framework that they feel good about these minor cannabinoids in there. So if they've been at it for 3+ years on CBD, they can't react that quickly for Delta 8. So a lot of states are just saying, this isn't worth the risk. We, feel that there could be a consumer, it's not safe for consumers, in which case we're just going to ban it outright. So, for better or worse, that's kind of the component. And the cannabis industry is going to continue to, and the CBD industry for that matter, going to continue to lobby against Delta 8, because Delta 8 is a direct competitor to cannabis. Why should I pay cannabis level taxes if I can get psychoactive products at the, the smoke shop down the street and not have to pay taxes on it? So.
Fair point. Antoine, did you have another question?
Yes. Someone wanted to know what changes can the market expect to see in terms of gummies in the next few
Mhm.
months?
Sure. In the next few months, I mean, over the longer term trend in gummies, we're seeing this really take over as a dominant form factor in the CBD space. They're very popular in those other, minor cannabinoids as well, which kind of mimic to a large extent what happens in CBD and cannabis. There's a lot of innovation happening, in those categories in terms of, flavor profiles, other functional ingredients. A lot of them are incorporating things like adaptogens, in there. I could talk to you all day about what's going on in the gummy space, but it's really taking over a lion's share of many companies' sales, really kind of shifting away from kind of those traditional tincture sales, if that makes sense.
And I think the last question is simply, how can people find out more information from Brightfield and keep up with what you all are doing?
Yeah. So you can come to brightfieldgroup.com. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. Our email address you can reach out to is marketing@brightfieldgroup.com, which we can provide in here, in the link as well. We have a contact us page. So if you want to chat with me or with members of our team in here, you can reach out via that contact us page. We do also have put out a great deal of content, on our pages, that will have kind of some redacted reports for kind of public viewing on our webpage, and are promoted through our social channels, particularly LinkedIn and Twitter in there. But certainly if you want more information and really to dig into a lot of depth, there's, our clients have access to a great deal of all of the data that was, provided today, and a great deal of depth on both market, consumer, brand data in the cannabis, CBD, and emerging product space.
Bethany, I did have one last question for you. Sorry to come in with this last question.
Mm-hmm.
So see that some of the Delta 8 products are coming,
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, as you said, don't invest too much into those Delta 8 products. In your research and your work, what do you think the shelf life is here for Delta 8 and D10 and those things?
I think that, I would look at this, I would encourage people to look at this as a trend to watch over the next, say, 18 months or so. Beyond that, it could last beyond that. It could continue to scale. It's entirely possible that there could be more kind of regulatory environments around it that would allow for the products to continue with testing or things like that. But, my expectation is more states are going to continue to ban it, in which case there's going to be a bit of a shift away from Delta 8 and into Delta 10, and then the next one and the next one and the next one, unless the FDA decides to kind of ban something outright.
Will we see an insurgence come back of normal standard CBD products, or you think the market is just going to keep innovating?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is. We also are seeing a mix of CBD and the THC levels on CBD products kind of creep up towards that 0.3% limit, in there, and being able to see more of a mix of CBD products, that can hit more of those need states, but they're really kind of a different needs, a different use case. If people are going to Delta 8 and Delta 10 for psychoactive results, CBD is generally not psychoactive in nature. It's more of a relaxer. It's more of a, a medicinal product, anxiety, depression, relaxation product, rather than something that's going to necessarily get you high, right? So I think there's some more resurgence of CBD potentially thereafter, but again, it's more likely to divert into the legal cannabis market as that becomes more prolific.
Wonderful. Well, I'd like to thank you so much for your time today, Bethany. As always, it's a pleasure. For those of you who have not registered yet for our up-and-coming Tobacco Plus Expo trade show that takes place in Las Vegas at the Las Vegas Convention Center, you can do so at the Tobacco Plus Expo website. Click on the attend, register to attend button, and get yourself signed up. It's a sold-out show. It was last year. It was even bigger this year. It's going to be a great show. We're looking forward to seeing you. Bethany, thank you again so much. I think we need to continue this. We'll follow up, and hopefully we can get another session in the next couple of months.
Perfect. It's my pleasure. Thank you.
All right, guys. Take care. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.